to find a common policy trajectory towards this, which looks like a brave new world.
Just finally, Richard, look, we've touched on this recently, but look, getting that tone right if you're going to question the government's handling of the crisis. What have you made of that? We've had, a lot of commentary around Simon Bridges in his Facebook post, Deborah Russell and her perhaps misstep with what she said about small business. It must be very tough to get that tone right and consistent in a time like this.
Yeah, it is, and I think we have a bit of a propensity to climb on. There have been a couple of pile-ons here. I think Mr Bridges got the tone wrong on 2 occasions, but he's got a really crucial constitutional role at the moment. As the leader of the opposition under a state of emergency, it's his constitutional duty to hold the feet of the government to the fire and to ask the awkward questions. Politically, I think that becomes easier for him to do that now because we're now starting to talk about future economic policy and what best responses are and who the winners are and the losers and so on. Harder to do that when you're raising questions about the government's policy around level 4. Did we go too soon? Did we go too late? But I think we're moving out of that, and I think we're quite quickly going to move into a climate where it becomes much easier and at a much lower risk for opposition parliamentarians to start asking hard questions of the administration.
Right. Professor of Politics at Massey University, Richard Shaw, thank you very much for being with us.
Cheers, Wallace. Okay,
yes, what do you reckon what Richard said there, Lizzie? And interesting, Parliament being back today. Green co-leader Marama Davidson began by saying she's happy to see MPs again after so long a time. Have you missed it, or was it a good bit of a break?
Look, it's really, really heartening to see our wheels of democracy turning again. It has been a bit worrying and kind of bizarre, I think, for people like me who are kind of political junkies to not have that political process. It's just happening in the background, our elected officials doing what they're elected to do. So it's great that they're all back. I think it's actually been fantastic that we've had a coalition during this. I know it can be really challenging, but it's meant that there have been some different views around the table. And I think in a way, maybe it's provided a bit of balance that may not have been there if there were only one party that was in power. And it's really important now that we do start to allow that dissent to actually be voiced so that we can hear different perspectives. We're facing an enormous, enormous challenge. So we need critical thinking. We need people to question because we need to get the best outcome.
Liam, your view?
Well, politics is about who gets what, when and how. And when that's at stake, you will never maintain unanimity for very long. And so it's just impractical to think that squabbling won't return, and actually squabbling within politics is a sign of healthy politics.
Absolutely.
And I just want to add that don't expect to see any major transformations, and one of the reasons for that is MMP. We have a constitutional system designed to stop major transformational policies being enacted by requiring consensus. So I wouldn't be getting my hopes up about anything too major coming from political parties.
Okay. Simon Bridges said on the final notes today it's quite clear he'll be National Party leader come election day. Briefly around the panel, very briefly, is he right, Liam?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and Lizzie?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of too late in the piece, so I think he will be there to the end.
All right. Wonderful to have you both on. Lizzie and Marley, Liam here, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And I'm Wallace Chapman on the panel. Checkpoint is next. I'm with you tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, it was back to business for hundreds of thousands of Kiwis today, but not business as we know it. We're not out of the woods yet. The PM and DG walk back their comments about eliminating COVID-19. An Auckland Mall owner says some of her tenants aren't paying their rent even with a 50% discount, and the government needs to do more for small businesses. A Taranaki iwi says 70% of the people that stopped at a controversial roadside checkpoint were breaking alert level 3 rules. The sporty among us have wasted no time picking up the racket, golf clubs and surfboards, and level 3 luxuries are back on the menu. We joined the early morning queues for burgers and fries.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No mai, haere mai. I'm Paul Brennan. The Prime Minister says it's the government's aspiration to move the country out of level 3 after 2 weeks, but whether it does is up to all New Zealanders. During Parliament's first question time since the lockdown began, the Leader of the Opposition, Simon Bridges, asked Jacinda Ardern today whether she could assure the public level 3 will only last 2 weeks. She replied that that's not in the government hands.
But actually in the hands of our team of almost 5 million. It will be a collective job. If we stick to the rules, we manage to keep away community transmission and stay in control of the virus, then our ambition is then, of course, to move to level 2.
Mr Bridges also asked Ms Ardern why more businesses aren't able to operate under level 3. He said many are warning they will fail if more government support does not come soon.
Does she accept the urgency for businesses and jobs, such as the 10% of workers in retail, of getting out of level 3?
Mr Speaker, I absolutely do. We have been acutely aware of their needs and their desire to get back into a position where they're trading face-to-face again.
Jacinda Ardern said the government is looking at whether industry-specific support is necessary. Builders are waiting with bated breath as their clients decide whether to press on with future builds. Most in the sector are back on site today. Some are on the tools, while others are trying to work out how they can be used safely. A director of Skookum Construction, Cameron Horn, is managing the renovation of a villa in Auckland's Herne Bay. He says while they've picked up that job where they left off, the future's more uncertain.
A lot of people are sort of a little bit hesitant to commit at the moment, obviously with the financial situation. And also, with their jobs, we've had our next jobs basically been put on hold. We don't have a job to go to after this, unfortunately. It's sort of a bit of a waiting game, I guess, and just see what happens. Cameron Horn of Skookum Construction. The death of a 5-month-old baby in Whangarei has been referred to a coroner following a post-mortem today. Paramedics called the police yesterday morning after the baby was found unresponsive at an address in the suburb of Kensington. A spokesperson says the infant died despite the efforts of staff at the scene. The police had been called to the property the previous evening. 14 people have been arrested over the theft of more than 100 juicy rental cars in South Auckland last week. The police say they have so far recovered 50 vehicles taken from the Mangere car yard. Mackenzie Smith reports.
Most of the cars were found at properties in the area, but a few were recovered after they and their drivers were spotted by the police. Some of the stolen vehicles had already been advertised for sale online. 18 vehicles belonging to another rental company were also interfered with at the yard, but none were stolen. 9 of those arrested are facing charges. Call Mackenzie Smith, TNA.
A nurse caring for Rosewood Rest Home residents who'd been moved to Christchurch's Burwood Hospital was exposed to COVID-19 when her mask was pulled off by a resident with the virus. The nurse and another worker at the rest home were identified as COVID-19 cases over the weekend. The Canterbury DHB's Medical Officer of Health, Raymond Pink, says the nurse was wearing full protective equipment at the time but had their mask pulled off and face touched. He says the other staff member caught the virus from a colleague who was infectious before they showed symptoms. After nearly 5 weeks of almost total lockdown, many people throughout the country were keen for a taste of takeaways today, once alert level 3 kicked in. Cars were queued up along the road outside KFC in Lower Hutt this afternoon. The smell of fried chicken was in the air and this hungry customer couldn't wait.
I was on my way to McDonald's, but that line was huge. This one was like 5-6 cars and I was lucky. I didn't miss it, they were making it at home, but I don't like cooking.
A KFC customer. McDonald's and Burger King were also packed at lunchtime with customers keen to get a burger for the first time in weeks. It's 4 minutes past 5. Sport and the Warriors boss, Cameron George, says they still need more information before they can commit to the proposed resumption of the NRL competition. The chair of the Australian Rugby League Commission, Peter V'landys, has confirmed they have an exemption from border authorities for the side to enter Australia on Sunday. But he says the club are yet to receive any official information or notification and also need an exemption from the New South Wales state government to train while undergoing the 2-week quarantine.
We're waiting on any formal approvals and exemptions that have been either given or discussed in the last 24 hours to be provided to the club. And then we want to understand what the competition structure is and also, what the NRL are expecting to do for the families and players' salaries.
Cameron George. And plans to resume the English Premier League football season will step up this week in what has been labelled Project Restart. Several clubs have opened their training grounds to players for individual work ahead of a potential resumption on June the 8th. That's the news.
This is a COVID-19 official government announcement. New Zealand has now moved to Alert Level 3. Continue to stay home where possible, including for work and learning, and stay in your bubble. If you're going back to your place of work, you must maintain physical distancing from your colleagues at all times. Remember to thoroughly wash and dry your hands regularly, and cough and sneeze into your elbow. It stops the spread of the virus. Don't go to work if you feel sick. If you have a cough, cold, sore throat or other flu-like symptoms, contact your GP or Healthline and get tested. Many schools and early childhood education centres will open from tomorrow, but children should continue to learn at home where possible. Under Alert Level 3, there will be more traffic on the roads, so take extra care. You can find more information on what you can and can't do at Alert Level 3 at covid19.govt.nz.
Now the short forecast from Met Service, and it is short. Northland, cloudy periods to midnight tomorrow Wednesday, by the way. Cloudy periods for Northland. For the rest of the North Island, fine apart from a few areas of fog in the morning. For the South Island, except Fiordland, fine apart from a few areas of fog or frost in the morning. Fiordland cloudy, patchy rain developing in the west about now. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers for the rest of today, cloudy periods tomorrow. 5:05.
Thanks, Paul, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. It was back to business for hundreds of thousands more New Zealanders today, but business was far from usual. Level 3 eased some restrictions to breathe some life back into the economy and allow a few more activities, but strict bans remain on socialising or group gatherings. With new COVID safety practices in place across the board, it's taken some adjusting, but businesses and shoppers say they're just happy to get the money moving again. Our reporter Logan Church and cameraman Dom Thomas have spent the day talking to business owners, coming up with creative ways to operate under Alert Level 3. Logan joins us now live from Courtney Place in Wellington. Logan, how many stores have reopened and how many people have been out and about?
Well, less than 24 hours ago, this street and all of Wellington resembled a ghost town. But with some businesses reopening today, the streets have been noticeably busier. A very welcome sight for those able to operate. A sigh of relief in Wellington today as many businesses reopen after more than 4 weeks of forced holiday. Among them is Palmer's Garden Centre in Plimmerton.
So we've set up a drive-thru, so customers is fully contactless, so customers are coming in, they stay in their car, they each get a personal shopper, and the personal shopper's picking out everything they want. We've got some great deals going, and when they get to the checkout over here, then they pay with PayWave, and they're able to go home and get gardening. That's owner Richard Pearson. He says this is the first drive-through garden centre of its type in New Zealand. Customers have been driving through all morning, picking up vegetables, compost, flowers, everything you can imagine. It's a welcome sight for owner Richard. He has never had to shut the store for this long in the 20 years his family has owned this Palmer's. We did have a flood 6 years ago where this entire car park was inundated with water. But yeah, this is the first time we've been shut for more than 3 days in 20 years. The plants have loved it. They've flourished, they've put on lots of growth. We've been down watering and feeding, so plants have loved it, but you can't operate a business without customers and income. Meanwhile, in Wellington CBD, restaurants and cafes are slowly reopening. Sweet Mother's Kitchen owner Diana Parker was already juggling multiple orders by lunchtime, all while trying to get their new contactless system up and going.
We have got 2 different pickup points. And we're actually just seeing how it does work at this stage, which we think it is working. So we've got signage out the front and contactless payment. It has been a little bit stressful, but just having, it's nice being open now. At many restaurants across Wellington, including Sweet Mother's Kitchen, everyone who turns up to pick up food or deliver supplies have to sign a register and leave their contact details. Across the road, Fabrizio Abate, sous chef at Nicolini's restaurant, is sweeping leaves out from the footpath in front of their restaurant and marking the grounds with duct tape. He and his brother Antonio will soon be setting up tables and signs so customers and delivery drivers can safely pick up takeaway orders.
So we'll be starting from one end here. We'll have a divider with some tables where the food will be placed, by one of our team members that will be running the outside. He'll be standing outside, and then from there we'll have another divider with some more tables, and then another divider, and then another divider. The idea is contactless pickup will be on one side, and we've put some placed tape down on the bricks, so customers have the 2 metre spacing all measured out, and the drivers will have a 2 metre back here with placing. Never had to run a restaurant like this. It's new. It'll be new to everybody, I suppose. Never. It's, as we were saying before, it's a lot less about the food than it's ever been, especially for us Italians, where we get a little OTT about our passion.
In Lower Hutt, Sue Reid of Shine Cafe says coffees, scones and muffins have been flying out to the door all day.
We've done over 200 coffees today. And the chef out the back's just been slamming out more scones. So she's redone 3 lots of scones of the normal orders that we would do. So we've had a great day.
But Sue says what she's enjoying most is seeing people and staff back out and about, all while keeping distant from each other.
So just being able to smile and say hello and just feeling that part of our culture that's been missing starting to be introduced again.
This is the new norm for these businesses. Alerts level 3 is expected to remain for at least 2 weeks. Despite the alert level staying at 3, there certainly have been lots of people out and about here on Courtney Place this evening. We've been here for about 20 minutes to half an hour, and already hundreds of people have walked past, all to be fair, staying away from each other. So people seem to be adhering to those social distancing guidelines. But really the changes here are actually in the shop fronts. Plenty of restaurants and cafes here have reopened. Many, it's about 10 past 5, many getting ready for their first dinner service for weeks. We've been speaking to some of these restaurants over the lockdown period, and 4 weeks ago, a month ago, plenty of owners were stressed. They were really worried about the future, how this would impact their cash flow. Today, though, we really got a sense of optimism on our visits to some of these places. They really hoped that people would get out and about, and certainly from what we can see here tonight, people are doing so.
Thanks, Logan. That's Logan Church joining us live from Courtney Place in Wellington. Looked like a couple of delivery trucks had pulled up behind him as well. Meanwhile, in Auckland, it was all about coffee and the prospect of expanding our bubbles. Our cameraman Nick Monroe and reporter Nita Blake-Person headed out to catch the action.
Out of the house and straight to the sea.
It's pretty exciting to be back in the water. It just calms the soul and mind. It's great.
Swimming, paddleboarding and kayaking have been off the limits for the past 5 weeks. Today's move to level 3 meant they were back on the agenda, and not a second too soon for some.
That's all I've been looking forward to, is swimming, yeah. After a month's lockout, it's just been, it's great for the mind and soul, feel normal again.
Morning activities were followed by the much-missed cafe coffee fix, albeit from afar.
Even though we're standing there, we had to text it in, and they text back to say that it's available within a few minutes. And there it was. But this is the first cup in 40 days, and my head's starting to swim a little bit already, so all that caffeine's having its effect already.
But it was the chance to slightly expand bubbles that was causing the biggest buzz.
You can always do without coffee, but family's everything, isn't it? That's fantastic. Level 3's great.
Busier roads and noisier neighbourhoods signalled an easing of lockdown restrictions, but return to pre-COVID life is a long way off. Gone were the usual crowds from this Auckland open home, with new COVID safety practices paramount for real estate agent Steve Kerber.
Today, obviously, the people will arrive. We make sure that they're briefed, make sure that they're well, keep our physical distance from them, offer them gloves, sanitation, and then take them through the house on a one-on-one basis, monitoring what they do and what they touch, because of course if after they've left, if they have touched something, I then have to wipe it down. So we're only allowed to have 2 groups through a property in any one day.
But the lockdown has not deterred sellers or buyers.
We've got 20 of these viewings booked up for this week already, so there's obviously a little bit of demand for these type of properties in this area.
Builders picked up their tools again for the first time in more than a month today.
Box, I've got contact tracing sheet in case I do get sick, so we can see who I've been in contact with.
Daniel Mahoney says he's glad to be back at work, but things are definitely different.
There's a lot more rules, regulations, cleanliness, all that sort of carry on, which is good. It's good because beforehand, it was all pretty willy-nilly, just do whatever you want. It's a bit of a nuisance, but you can sort of understand why, so it makes it tolerable.
The shift to level 3 is meant to encourage spending, but not socialising. That means new ways of doing business right across the board. The warehouse is trialling new drive-thru shopping stations, which means customers don't even have to leave their cars.
You go online, you place your order, you select collection and the store you want to collect from. And if it is one of our 4 drive-thru locations, then as you come into the car park, you'll be directed to drive down to our collection point here. You'll proceed through to the desk where the team will take your name and order number. They'll retrieve the parcel, they'll place it on the table, they'll step back, and then the customer is able to get their parcel, get back in their car and drive away, hopefully in a completely contactless way.
Spokesman Ian Carter says cooped up families have been looking for ways to keep themselves occupied in the first few hours of level 3.
I think the things today are definitely toys and games and household essentials. I think are definitely the things we've started to see today.
Keen gardeners and people looking to get onto their next DIY project while stuck at home have also been relishing the shopping opportunity. This garden centre was filling orders all morning.
So they give you a zone over the phone, and so they've directed all the traffic through one way. You go over to the zone, they've got your car rego number, and they just point you or bring your order out for you to load up into your car. So all over in 5 minutes. Oh, it was fabulous, so simple. 5 weeks, this is the highlight.
The retail therapy is being welcomed not only by shoppers but businesses desperate to get money moving again. They're keeping an eager eye on the government's plans to further ease restrictions. Cabinet will reveal what happens next on the 11th of May. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And now that we've moved to alert level 3, takeaways and drive-thrus can reopen, so long as they can ensure completely contactless transactions. Producer Ali J and video journalist Simon Rogers got up at 3 a.m. to see who was first in the queues.
It's 5 a.m. in Royal Oak in Auckland. The 24-hour McDonald's here is preparing to open for customers for the first time in nearly 5 weeks. The sun isn't up yet, but since 4:30 a.m, eager customers have been parked up in the queue for the drive-thru.
I have breakfast here all the time, so that's what I miss the most, is having breakfast at McDonald's.
The loosening of restrictions to level 3 means certain businesses can reopen, and for some, the drive-thru offered a celebratory back-to-work breakfast for the crew.
I'm going to work, so I'm on my way to work. Going to get the boys some McDonald's. I don't know, big brekkie beef burger combo, probably, for progress plumbing.
For others, level 3 means adding a loved one to their bubble and celebrating with an early meal.
So we have been told that we can expand our bubble, so this is my boyfriend and it's the first time we see each other in a month, so I went to pick him up and now we're going to get food. Probably some hash browns.
Yeah.
And some muffins. And how about you?
Maybe a bacon and egg McMuffin sounds good, eh? Yeah.
We asked what they've missed the most during the level 4 lockdown.
Going to work, actually. Yeah, not McDonald's.
I'm just sick of the home food, like everything, yeah. We just miss our late nights feeds and just coming here, yeah. At home, especially our kids, they miss their burgers.
At 6 a.m. on the dot, the lights are up and the intercom crackles into life once again.
Morning, place your order when you're ready.
Hi, can I get a hash brown and a flat white, thank you?
Can I grab 4 big brekkie beef burger combos, please?
Can I get a BLT bagel combo, please?
Everything is contactless. As the cars swoop round to the first window, a gloved hand holds out a card machine. One tap with a card and it's taken back in to be disinfected. And at the next window, gloved hands pass a warm bag of food through the car windows. One or two stop to enjoy their first breakfast cooked by someone else in weeks as the sun comes up.
So there's your Benedict bagel, New York City Benedict bagel. And yeah, that comes... Oh, they didn't give me my hash brown. But yeah, and then the hotcakes here. So, and then the orange juice.
Most, however, aren't hanging around. They have work or bed to get to, and in some cases, a surprise breakfast to deliver.
I wanted to surprise my mum, also Macca's. Yeah. Just the beef burger brisket. Yeah, my mum loves beef, so I thought I'll surprise her. She doesn't know. So yeah, if you're watching, hi mum.
One look at social media shows it isn't just Auckland where queues of cars have been snaking round drive-thru car parks. And in Christchurch, residents have been up early and enjoying the new freedoms of Alert Level 3.
My last meal before lockdown, first one back in.
Just a bucket of chicken, I think. 8 wicked wings and, they don't do burgers, probably 12 wicked wings then.
I think I'm going to get a wicked box just for me and my family.
For Checkpoint, Ellie J.
And it is 21 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Were you up early to join the line for takeaways, or have you had a level 3 treat? Has it made any difference to you, the drop in levels? Let us know your thoughts. The Director-General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, has had to walk back comments made by himself and the Prime Minister yesterday about the country having achieved elimination. New Zealand has been hailed in international media, including the New York Times and the Daily Telegraph, as having won the battle in eliminating COVID-19. While elimination has been achieved at alert level 4, giving Dr Bloomfield the confidence to move the country into level 3, the war has not been won. Here's political reporter Joe Moyer.
At yesterday's daily press conference, Dr Bloomfield was asked whether New Zealand had achieved elimination. It was this answer and the Prime Minister chipping in that resulted in yesterday's confusion.
I would say
currently?
Well, what I would say is that our goal is elimination. And again, that doesn't mean eradication, but it means we get down to a small number of cases, and so that we are able to stamp out any cases and any outbreaks that might come up. And if you think about alert level 4, I would say we've achieved through alert level 4 the position we wanted to be into, so that we could now start to move down alert levels.
Realising the waters had been muddied, Dr Bloomfield arrived at Parliament today armed with a clarification. Asked whether he accepted yesterday's remarks had given the country and the rest of the world a false impression, and whether he was concerned New Zealanders would be breathing a sigh of relief at a time they should still be vigilant, Dr Bloomfield didn't mince his words.
Yes, well then I can just clarify, we haven't eliminated it and we haven't eradicated it. So elimination, as I say, is not a point in time. It's not, we've got to the end of alert level 4, we've eliminated it. Our elimination goal continues into alert level 3.
Dr Bloomfield says elimination is about having a low number of cases and a knowledge of where they're coming from and identifying people early. Then it's a case of stamping out the virus and continuing to maintain strict border restrictions to be sure no new cases are being imported.
In a sense, it's a single word to describe that ongoing keep it out, stamp it out phase, different from what was in the pandemic influenza plan, which talked about moving into a manage it phase. We clearly decided we wouldn't do that, and we have seen what has happened in other countries and jurisdictions where they have either deliberately by choice or have had that choice taken away, where they have moved into a manage it phase.
Elimination is by no means eradication, and the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says this is a situation of entering into the world of epidemiologists speak.
And they know well what each of these terms mean in a health sense, but of course in an everyday sense they mean often something different. You'll have heard me continually say elimination does not mean 0 cases. It will mean an ongoing campaign and zero tolerance for cases. We will have to keep stamping COVID out until there is a vaccine. We are not done.
National's health spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says Dr Bloomfield probably felt the need to clarify on behalf of the Prime Minister.
This underscores the importance of talking in plain English. The public are not epidemiologists. They don't have the information the Prime Minister has, and it's really important that they get on the same page, talk in plain English, and make it clear to New Zealanders where we're at and how we've got to stay there.
Dr Bloomfield finished today's media conference doing his best to unmuddy the waters.
Well, I hope my explanation today has helped to clarify that if there was mud yesterday, the water is clearer today, and I hope you all have a good understanding of that and that other New Zealanders do.
Like many people today, Dr Bloomfield says he too enjoyed a takeaway coffee, but he warned how important it is not to undo the good work that has already been done. And that means not congregating with friends outside cafes or restaurants. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
The construction sector is worried about the future of its workforce as clients wait to see how the economic crisis shakes down. Most in the sector are back on site today under Alert Level 3. Some are on the tools and others are trying to work out how they can do so safely. But there are fears the pipeline of jobs might dry up. Jordan Bond reports.
A welcome sound for one of the first and biggest sectors to be back on the tools. Cameron Horn, a director of Skookum Construction, is managing the renovation of a villa in Auckland's Herne Bay.
Yeah, it's good to be back at work earning some money again, but a pretty valuable time to spend some time with the family too.
He says the work environment's a little bit different to when they left.
Try to do the distancing thing, we're having to wear masks and gloves and wash your hands regularly and sign in, sign out boards, so now you can no longer leave site and come back, you have to stay on site, things like that.
Which means maybe a bit of a change in lunchtime habits for some tradies.
So we're not allowed to leave site to get lunches and fluids and stuff, so you just got to make sure you've got enough on site. Yeah, homemade lunches, stay healthy.
Mr Horn says while they've managed to pick up this job where they left off, the future is not so straightforward.
A lot of people are sort of a little bit hesitant to commit at the moment, obviously with the financial situation. And also, with their jobs, we've had our next jobs basically been put on hold. We don't have a job to go to after this, unfortunately. It's sort of a bit of a waiting game, I guess, and just see what happens.
It's something a lot of the industry's grappling with. To what extent the scale of the economic downturn will hit different types of construction. For Glenn Green of Roof Care, there are jobs on the board for now.
As far as work's concerned, we've got plenty of it. The biggest issue that you're going to find around construction is obviously whether people are willing to spend that, given the current climate. No one really understands what's going to happen with the economy, but I guess for now it's just status quo until we know otherwise.
Some large companies have already had big commercial clients pull the pin, and some from the sector are worried about widespread job losses without government intervention. The Chief Executive of the Construction Industry Council and Master Builders, David Kelly, says how many future projects come through the pipeline is the great unknown.
The big issues are the forward work program. Not hearing a lot of drop-offs from confirmed clients who'd already completed design, but it's really those future clients. That's where the big focus will turn to over the next few weeks.
The slowdowns even come for some already. Commercial construction company Naylor Love says a client's already hit pause on a hotel that almost finished, and they're worried one or two others will do the same. Chief Executive Rick Hurd says while the government's able to fund and fast-track public sector jobs like schools and roads, the private sector doesn't have the same security of funding. He says without a government injection into the private sector, there could be significant job losses.
It's certainly a possibility if there's no means to effectively stimulate private sector investment. It's a real possibility. We need to see some positive action in the next 2 or 3 weeks or a month at least to see what actually are they going to do to help stimulate that private sector investment.
David Kelly says the next 12 to 18 months will be critical as an industry with 500,000 people directly and indirectly employed watches on. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the owner of an Auckland mall calls for the government to intervene, saying some tenants have paid no rent at all this month despite a 50% discount. Fiordland tourism operators fear they won't last the distance, and a South Taranaki iwi says 70% of the people it stopped at a Pātea checkpoint today were flouting the rules. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But let's go to to the headlines now with Paul Brennan.
Thanks, Lisa. The Prime Minister says any move to Alert Level 2 is in the hands of New Zealanders who need to stick to the rules and keep community transmission at bay. Jacinda Ardern was responding to a question from the Leader of the Opposition, Simon Bridges, in Parliament today about how long the country will remain at Level 3. Mr Bridges also stressed the urgency of getting out of Level 3 so more businesses, especially retail, can get back to work. Jacinda Ardern says the government is looking at the need for industry-specific support, especially for those unable to trade safely due to the current safety measures. Builders are on tenterhooks as their clients decide whether to keep going with planned projects. Most construction workers are back on site today, but some say the future is more uncertain. The coroner will investigate the death of a 5-month-old baby in Whangarei after a post-mortem today. Paramedics called the police yesterday morning after the baby was found unresponsive at an address in the suburb of Kensington. A nurse caring for rest home residents who were moved to Christchurch's Burwood Hospital was exposed to COVID-19 when her mask was pulled off by a resident. The nurse and another worker at Rosewood Rest Home were identified as COVID-19 cases over the weekend. The Canterbury DHB's Medical Officer of Health says the other staff member caught the virus from an asymptomatic colleague. The stock market closed up 3.3%, buoyed by positive sentiment sweeping Asian markets. The NZX Top 50 index took a lead from global markets encouraged by the easing of lockdown restrictions in some major economies. The index rose 340 points, with strong gains in some tourism and transport-related stocks. And road workers have copped abuse from passing motorists on State Highway 1 north of Wellington today. The transport agency says workers were verbally abused and some had road cones thrown at them. It says the public should be patient and comply with restricted speed limits. And those are the headlines.
And welcome back to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The New Zealand share market has risen sharply today, but there are warnings that the wild ride is not over. The NZX 50 followed global markets as lockdown measures start to ease around the world. But the head of a KiwiSaver fund has stopped buying shares himself and predicts there will be more waves of selling. Sharon Brett-Kelly looks at what's happened and why people are rushing to buy shares, even in companies that are struggling to survive.
Not since the global financial crisis of 2008 have share markets fallen so dramatically. In just 1 month, New Zealand's top 50 index dropped nearly 30% from a lifetime high to a 2-year low, while the US's S&P 500 was down almost 34%. In mid-March, it had a week when it fell close to 5% on each of 2 consecutive days, and by closer to 8% in another session.
Those are the biggest declines that we've seen since the GFC, and they're some of the quickest falls of that nature that we've seen in decades, if not ever.
Mark Lister of Craig's Investment Partners says everyone knew something was coming for the markets because they had been rising for 11 years.
If you'd asked me at the start of the year, will there be a recession and will there be a share market downturn of 20 or 30%, I would have said, yeah, there absolutely could be, and it could come from the trade war between the US and China. It could come from too much debt in the world. Could come from interest rates rising. I would have rattled off a long list of reasons of why that might happen, but I wouldn't have singled out a potential pandemic from a virus like this that shuts down the whole global economy.
Brad Gordon from Hobson Wealth has worked through the tech crash of 2000, September 11 and the global financial crisis. But what happened on March 16th was the most extreme event he's experienced.
I had a really horrific day. Markets effectively froze. Debt markets effectively froze. The most liquid asset in the world, US Treasury bonds, yields spiked because of the race in terms of people wanting to liquidate them. So that really is a once in a blue moon, black swan type event that causes the most liquid asset in the world to basically be unsellable.
Investors' fear and uncertainty about where and when the crisis would end drove them to sell. But the biggest surprise was the market's rebound late March.
They're only probably 15%-ish below their highs, and that's been really surprising for me. I thought we were going to see more waves of selling pushing the market lower.
Martin Hawes chairs the Summer KiwiSaver Investment Committee.
They seem to me to be pretty much ignoring the reality of of both the human cost of the disease but also the economic cost of the disease. And I don't think the markets have calculated those costs properly.
He says the rebound was driven by the belief there will be a cure for COVID-19 soon, and governments will keep pumping billions of dollars of cash into the markets. In New Zealand, the slump in share prices hit the obvious: travel, tourism, retailers, and those companies closely linked to China. But then the bargain hunters emerged. Air New Zealand's share price went from $2.50 pre-COVID to 80 cents to $1.30. Fletcher Building fell from $5.50 to a low of $3 and is currently $3.63. Mark Lister says investors are buying into what the company will look beyond COVID-19.
Maybe just investors stepping back and thinking, look, 2020 is going to be terrible. Part of 2021 is going to be terrible, but a lot of these good quality businesses on the share market, whether it's Main Freight or Fish and Paykel Healthcare or Port of Tauranga or even the likes of Auckland Airport, on a 10-year view or longer, those businesses will still be around.
Auckland Airport's share price went from around $8 when the border controls were imposed to a low of $4.26 and have now clawed their way back to around $6. Brad Gordon says passengers have gone from about 58,000 a day to a handful, but investors believe they will return.
What is key is, will Auckland Airport survive financially over the next year to 18 months? Should traffic take quite a while to recover? And what they have done is gone and raised $1.2 billion of equity capital in order to strengthen their balance sheet in order to survive that period of downturn.
Higher risk investors, or bulls, are happy to take a punt on the share market. Martin Hawes, who's usually accused of being too optimistic, has turned bearish and is staying right away for now.
I wouldn't be buying into the likes of Air New Zealand or Tourism Holdings or any of those kinds of companies. And in fact, I'm not buying personally at the moment at all. I don't think the economic damage, even the human damage maybe, is known yet. And that if you look from a global perspective, we could yet be in for some quite nasty surprises yet. And I think there will be more waves of selling and therefore more downside in the market.
Mr. Hawes also thinks investing in houses right now is a bad move. His message to investors: you can never beat a diversified portfolio. Buy a little bit of everything. For Checkpoint, Sharon Brett Kelly.
And turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello.
Steel and Tube is making up to 200 of its staff redundant. What's it saying?
Well, look, it's going to, I guess, between 150 and 200 jobs are going to go. Now, part of that is because of the COVID-19 crisis, but also the companies decide to bring forward some restructuring plans. So about half of those jobs would have gone anyway, sooner than later, I guess. But because of the economic downturn brought by the virus, the companies decide to accelerate, bring forward those plans. So about half those jobs would have gone anyhow. The companies also asked their executives to take pay cuts of between 20 and 30%. Basically, the company's got some work ahead with the infrastructure projects, but isn't very confident about private sector investment, which listeners may have heard a little earlier in the program. That is definitely a concern for companies like Steel and Tube, which manufactures products for the construction sector.
Okay, the other interesting thing today is the BNZ. It's one of the first big banks to report financial results post the COVID-19 virus. So what are its numbers looking like?
Look, their profit has fallen by about a third. It's budgeting more for bad debts arising from the pandemic, and it's written down the value of some of its software as well. The bank, it's owned by Australia's NAB, and its net profit for the 6 months ended March, this is the New Zealand company, was $367 million, and that compares with last year's $550 million. Now, the chief executive of the bank says that they've helped tens of thousands of home loans, business assistance, and government-backed loans to companies. So they've been helping people out, but they've also had to turn down quite a few businesses that, actually, just a minute there, very few businesses, not quite a few, very few businesses that were seeking support. Now, they said that those companies were actually on shaky ground before the pandemic, and they tend to be in the area of hospitality, tourism, and accommodation sectors. That's where they are expecting to see some of the business failures occurring.
Okay, so what else has been going on the markets today?
It's been a really interesting day on the market. So we were closed yesterday, but the rest of the world kept going. We had a choppy session. In the morning, it was quite strong, and then a little weaker because of the Australian market opening and then dragging down the New Zealand market. But at the last minute, we had quite a rally. We rose and finished up 3.3%, which is a big day for the New Zealand market. That was a 340-point gain to 10,760, and we saw gains across some of those more, stressed stocks. That's the either transport and tourism stocks. They helped to lift the market today.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business update. The owner of an Auckland mall says some businesses are not paying their rent, even though she's giving them a 50% discount, and the smaller operators need more help from the government. Glenfield Mall owner Dallas Pendergrass says some of the 115 tenants won't survive the massive restrictions on retail during lockdown and now at alert level 3. She told the Epidemic Select Committee today that small businesses don't want the PM's thanks for toughing it out. They need help like rent subsidies because compassion doesn't pay the bills. Mrs. Pendergrass says some businesses will never reopen and it's costly keeping the mall going, even though it's only partly open.
Our overhead is, give or take, $500,000 a month. And that includes all sorts of things like rates, insurance, then the other things, the day-to-day things like cleaning, security, management. There's a whole lot of things. We've got lifts and escalators, elevators, and they have to be serviced on a very regular basis because they're high traffic. The cleaning bill is huge, probably getting close to $100,000 a month.
So you are carrying those costs at the moment, which begs the question, do you think these shops should all be allowed to open now?
Well, I do. I do, because, we're not going to improve the situation until we do. And the longer it lasts, the worse it's going to be for them to open, the harder it's going to be for them to get back on their feet and reopen. I mean, you have to think that there is going to be, and we are planning for, there is going to be a downturn in the number of people that come to the mall. I mean, we know for a fact that some people will still be frightened to go out, some older people, and we do have, our demographic is mostly young families, but we do have some older customers as well. They'll be anxious.
And shouldn't they be? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic, so would it really be the right thing to open up all these shops now?
Yes, they should be anxious. I understand that completely. But Lisa, we're not in the middle of it anymore. We're over the middle of it. We're well over the middle of it. There's a handful of cases, and most of them, or all of them, are either from overseas or they're from a cluster and they've been traced. There is nobody new popping out of the woodwork. So why are we powering up?
Yeah, I suppose the health authorities would say to you that we've had new cases today, and the reason that our numbers are trailing off is because we're keeping the lid on people's movements and we're keeping a lid on the borders. So are we not better to sacrifice some element of the economy in order to preserve the health of our nation?
We've already done that. We've already made the sacrifice. And the health of our nation, that is a good topic to raise, because I'm more concerned about the mental health and the stress that these people are going through. That's going to do far more damage than COVID ever did.
So what do you think, that it's been over-dramatised?
I do. Yeah, I do. In the recent times, I don't think it was to start. I think the lockdown was probably a good way to go, but it's just to extend it out beyond today for most of the people that I'm interested in, which is not only my tenants. There's a lot of people throughout New Zealand that this affects. I mean, these people are the backbone of New Zealand. along with farmers. The farmers are too. But these small businesses, they're in every town, every little tiny corner of New Zealand, and they're the ones that are really feeling it.
The Prime Minister has obviously thanked everyone for the sacrifices that they're making. Do you not think she understands that there's sacrifice involved here?
I don't think she understands the enormity of it. I don't think she's got her head around how small business actually operates.
What makes you say that?
Because she wouldn't be discarding them to one side if she did. She wouldn't be just allowing them to suffer on the way they are with a mere thank you for everything you're doing, which is all that they've been given so far, a thank you. I mean, they don't want a thank you. They want to get back to work.
$10 billion wage subsidy package?
Well, yes, that's been helpful for the people they employ and for themselves, but put it into perspective, it's $585 a week, and a lot of these people have families. I mean, that doesn't even put the food on the table for them, let alone pay for their rent and all their other expenses that everybody has with everyday living.
So what do you need from the government then, right now? What do the businesses in your mall and you need?
We need to get back to work. We need to open the mall and we need to get back to work. And if the government isn't prepared to do that, then they need to offer a helping hand to these people by way of some sort of financial assistance.
And of what nature, the financial assistance? Because they've been very clear, we're in level 3 for at least 2 weeks. So what kind of financial assistance would compensate for that?
I don't know how they would work it out, to be honest, Lisa. I haven't really thought it through to any great extent, but I would think some kind of rent relief would go a long way to making them happy. I mean, we've done our bit. We've given 50% rent relief. It's still, for a lot of people, quite a lot of money to have to pay out. So I think that's probably, from my perspective, talking to them, that is the biggest thing that's worrying them at the moment.
So you would like some kind of rent guarantee from the government?
Yes, a rent guarantee would be good. I'm sure that these people would appreciate it. As far as we're concerned, we're facing the long distance of this. We've got shops that will become vacant. We've got huge costs for releasing these shops that are coming vacant. We've got also, as we mentioned before, topping up the operating expenses so we can keep the property in really top condition so that it is ready to open at a moment's notice. And because we're not getting any notice about when it's likely to happen, we're not getting any idea about what's going to happen in level 2. I mean, when you think about it, it's only 2 weeks away. We deserve some more information about that too.
Dallas, just to be clear, when you say that you've given your tenants a rent discount of 50%, Countdown, for example, that's in the mall and is still operating, I'm assuming that you didn't extend that discount to them?
No, we didn't.
Okay, what about Briscoe's?
Well, Briscoe's haven't paid the 50%.
So they haven't paid their rent?
No.
Okay.
They've made a very small contribution to part of their operating expenses.
Who else is in default in there of the big names? Warehouse?
No, the Warehouse has paid their share.
And Farmers?
Yes, they've paid their share.
And so did Farmers and Warehouse have a discounted rent as well, Dallas? Or
Absolutely, they have, yes.
Okay, so Warehouse and Farmers. And you mentioned the Aussie ones. Have you got Just Jeans in there?
Yes.
Have they paid up? Because I know in some other places they haven't.
No, they haven't.
And that is the Glenfield Mall owner, Dallas Pendergrass there. And a short time ago, we called Briscoe's owner, Rod Duke, to clarify the situation. He declined to be interviewed, but has just told our producer, Bridget Burke, that Briscoe's has a specific clause in their contract with Glenfield Mall, whereby if for any reason they are unable to trade in their shop space, rent ceases and a fair proportion only is payable. The issue here seems to be the figure that Briscoe's thinks is fair, here is not as much as what Glenfield Mall thinks is fair. Just Jeans has not returned our calls. It is 11 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know if you returned to work today. What was that like? Have you been in the queue for takeaways already? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Fiordland tourism operators say they've been taking a hit after hit since the end of last year, and they're not sure how many will be left standing. Since October, the region has faced bad weather that's grounded helicopters and flooding that cut access to its prized destination for weeks and damaged great walks. Tourism operators told reporter Tess Brunton they were on the road to recovery until COVID-19 struck.
Fiordland operators were left reeling when more than a metre of rain fell in less than 3 days. After more than 3 weeks with no visitors, the road to Milford Sound was reopened to tourist convoys, only to have numbers dry up as New Zealand's border closed and lockdown started the following month. Destination Fiordland manager Madeline Peacock says it's been a rough year.
We feel like we were hit by a truck in February and reversed back over in March. As crude as that sounds, it's kind of how it's been for us.
Usually more than 200,000 people would cruise in Fiordland in February and March. That dropped to just over 70,000 since the flooding hit. Madeline Peacock says businesses are facing some tough decisions and it's unclear who will survive.
At this stage, there's just too much uncertainty as to be able to make a call around whether businesses stay open or not. We do know that there are businesses that have worked out their viability over the next, till the end of the wage subsidy, and then some businesses have said we can last for 6 months.
Fiordland Jet co-owner Chris Adams says winter is looking bleak.
Tiani gets a lot of the side on from the ski fields. They come to New Zealand for 2 weeks, week skiing, come to Milford Sound, so they'll stop in at Tiani, they'll visit us for 2 or 3 days. So we're not going to get that. Harsh reality is it's going to be tough. It's going to be a really long road through winter.
Domestic tourism usually accounts for about a third of all visitors to Fiordland. But Chris Adams says businesses will be trying to attract more New Zealanders to the region. Fiordland Outdoors Co-General Manager and owner Christine Wallace says it's unbelievable what the region has faced in the past 6 months.
Yeah, you sort of plan for things sort of disrupting normal business, but I'm not sure any planning could have possibly been done in anticipation of both these events happening within, 6 weeks of each other. Yeah, it's definitely outside the realm of all of our experience combined.
She hopes Fiordland operators will band together and collaborate, but says her business may not reopen.
Nothing's off the table, but we'll be doing our absolute damnedest to make sure we ride this thing out. And as I say, we're right at the head of that line when things start recovering.
With no international tourists expected for months, she says there's never been a better time to visit Fiordland. The region's economic development agency, Great South, found close to a third of businesses they surveyed in Fiordland didn't think they'd be viable after the lockdown lifted. Its chief executive, Graham Budd, hopes more businesses will be able to hibernate through the quieter winter and return when the visitors do.
We're not going to be able to save everybody. Every business is not going to survive. That is a reality. I'm hoping that some of those that thought they might not be viable beyond a month or so will be able to just hibernate, and as long as we can get some business back from September.
Great South has launched a campaign asking Southlanders to buy, see and stay local. Clutha Southland National MP Hamish Walker says businesses need more certainty about what support will be available after the wage subsidy ends.
They've been hit really hard over the summer with weather disruptions. A 1 in 100 year flood in February. The China border was closed in February. Then we had the latest with COVID. They've basically lost all their revenue. So it's going to be incredibly tough several months over winter for many operators in Fiordland.
Tourism operators say they'll be waiting with bated breath to see what support is on offer and if they'll be able to carry on after the wage subsidy ends. For Checkpoint, ko Tess Brunton, Tēnei.
While after being cooped up inside for weeks, New Zealanders have been quick to return to social sport under Alert Level 3. Not every sports facility that could be open is open, but people are finding plenty of ways to keep active and physically distant now that they can get back to their preferred pastimes. Clay Wilson reports.
For sea swimming Wellingtonians, the first day back in Level 3 was perfect to dive back into their passion. Keen triathlete Paul Rodway says he wasn't joined by many others at a sunny Oriental Bay at 8 this morning. But he did notice a drop in the water temperature when he went for his first dip for a while.
Well, I was kitted up in all my gear. I put as much warm stuff I could get on, a wetsuit and so forth, and dived in. My God, it was cold. But what a wonderful day for the first swim in 5 or 6 weeks.
Even though the waves weren't pumping at Fitzroy Beach in New Plymouth, Kate Giles was determined to head out for her first surf in 33 days.
It's really, really bad, but I just want to get in the water. Just, get some salt in the hair and get out there, have a paddle. I would never usually surf that, not a chance, but yeah, desperation.
Another one who wasn't going to let the less than perfect conditions stop him was Jamie Mahia Andrews. The national paddleboard champion noticed a break from surfing had changed him in more ways than one.
Today was a lot more relaxed because I'm not so fit, and there was a little bit more on my part. I was more courteous to the others. Usually I'm just head down, go hard. Just nice to just say hello.
The North Shore Golf Club in Auckland sent members a 20-point list outlining strict Alert Level 3 playing conditions, including registers to record who visited with whom and where they went inside the facility. Club manager Roland Griffiths is pleased with the way members are responding, but says they're keeping watch to make sure rules are being followed. Griffiths says their biggest struggle is finding a way to safely get more players out on the course.
We went live with our booking sheet on Saturday, and within 6 minutes, it was completely full. So that gives you an idea of just how many people wanted to play. The majority of the tee times, believe it or not, are single, so people that just want to come out and play.
Wanaka Tennis Club is one of the few clubs around the country which reopened their courts today. Many tennis clubs say they can't easily operate in a way that satisfies the Alert Level 3 rules. Wanaka Tennis Club President Jeanette Hatton says they had locked the club rooms, shut away outdoor furniture and offered a gate code to the courts for members.
I know there were quite a few people who are keen to get out there and play tennis, and I just feel people should be able to. It's just people that have rung me and booked a course and said, "Oh, thank you so much for opening up. This is so great that we can do this." And we've got a system that will allow it.
Sports return has begun, but for those venturing out to their local club, safety remains the priority. For Checkpoint, Clay Wilson.
Let's get to some of your feedback now on the issue of COVID-19 and whether it is eliminated or not. Roger James has got in contact to say, right from the beginning, elimination was the term used in removing the coronavirus here in New Zealand. Anyone who cannot grasp the context in which it was used must be very slow on the uptake. Roger goes on to say there was always going to be a number of cases still ongoing. While there were still active cases, it is self-explanatory that the virus has not gone. Some choose to use semantics deliberately, including, unfortunately, the media. We've had a lot of feedback on the issue of what businesses should be allowed open under Level 3, in particular in relation to Glenfield Mall. We heard from the owner, Dallas Pendergrass, here today. She was before the Select Committee as well. She's offered her tenants a 50% discount. Some still are not paying that, and she believes that they should be allowed to open under this alert level. Most of you do not agree with her. Joe has got in touch to say, I'm gobsmacked by that woman's attitude. COVID doesn't just disappear magically after a well-behaved 4-week period. Stuart has also got in touch saying the mall owner doesn't appear to have her head around the epidemiology of a pandemic. She appears to be placing her own profits above the lives of the people who shop in her mall. David agrees, saying, your mall operator is purely selfish, only really worrying about her own business. She is certainly no expert in the field of community health. By her own admission, she hasn't really thought it through. Mark has got in touch from Christchurch. He says, to hell with the malls, they've destroyed countless more jobs and livelihoods than they ever supported. Listening to today's broadcast, you'd be led to believe that half the nation seems to think that COVID-19 was a beat-up, while the rest can't wait to gorge themselves on junk food. And this one, clearly the lady from the mall doesn't have any relatives or friends in countries where COVID-19 has had a terrifying impact due to the lack of social distancing.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. I'm Paul Brennan. Good evening. The Prime Minister says the government wants the country to move out of level 3 after 2 weeks, but whether it does is up to all New Zealanders. During Parliament's first question time since the lockdown began, the Leader of the Opposition, Simon Bridges, asked Jacinda Ardern today whether she could assure the public level 3 will last only 2 weeks. She replied that that's not in the government's hands, but in the hands of a team of almost 5 million, provided they stick to the rules and prevent community transmission of the coronavirus. Ms Ardern also says initial signs are that the number of children returning to school from tomorrow will be very low. She says she hasn't had an official report from the Ministry of Education yet, but the initial feedback is that the numbers are small and, in her view, that's as it should be.
We are still asking people to stay home and work from home and learn from home if they can, and I think you'll see tomorrow that will show up in the low number of people back in ECE and in schools.
Early childhood centres will open and schools up to Year 10 for the children of people who are returning to work under Level 3. National Simon Bridges says he's confident he'll still be party leader come election time. Mr Bridges has dismissed media reports about his leadership as a distraction. Some National MPs were alarmed by the negative public reaction to comments he made last week and started to question if he's the right person to lead the party. He was asked today whether he will fight the election as leader.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, that's quite clear. And I'm focused on things New Zealanders are focused on, which is, a sense that we've flattened the curve. Actually, we don't want to flatten the economy.
Simon Bridges says he regrets nothing about his actions or comments during the lockdown. The stock market closed up 3.3% today, buoyed by positive sentiment sweeping Asian markets. The NZX Top 50 index had a strong start to the short work week, taking a lead from global markets, which were encouraged by the easing of lockdown restrictions in major economies. The index rose by 340 points, with strong gains in some tourism and transport-related stocks, including Sky City Entertainment and Auckland Airport. Vehicle owners could face severe repair delays during the coming months. The General Manager of the Collision Repair Association, Neil Pritchard, says uncommon car parts or parts for less common vehicles need to be sourced from overseas, which has become far more challenging since the lockdown.
Generally, those parts would be imported by air freight. There's virtually no air freight. So what was 2 to 3 weeks is now going to be 10 to 12 weeks by sea. Clearly, that's going to create delays if the parts are not available locally.
Neil Pritchard says the cost of repairs is also likely to increase because of the health measures required, such as physical distancing and repeatedly sanitising vehicles, adding time and expense that the industry cannot afford to absorb. The Union of Students Association says it's unfair some students have had to fork out thousands of dollars for accommodation they haven't been able to occupy during lockdown. Its president, Isabella Lenihan-Aiken, says some Canterbury, Auckland, Otago and AUT halls are offering partial rebates, but it's not enough. She says students should not have to pay for accommodation they can't access. Victoria University students are protesting at being told they must pay a placeholder fee of $150 from today, despite not being allowed to return yet. During question time this afternoon, the Associate Minister of Education, Tracy Martin, told Parliament ministry officials met the Students' Union today to address the matter.
I understand there is varying practices across the country currently around charges at halls of residence at level 4 and level 3 when students are not living in their paid rooms, and I've asked for a picture of it all, as there are contracts and private provisions involved in some cases that need to be unpacked.
Tracy Martin says in the meantime she reiterates the Prime Minister's message to show compassion during an unprecedented time. It's exactly 4 minutes past 6. Sport this evening. 4 Australian Rugby League players caught breaking social distancing rules have been fined by the NRL. South Sydney's Lateral Mitchell and Melbourne's Josh Adokar must each pay more than $20,000 for their involvement in a gathering on a rural New South Wales property. Newcastle's Tyrone Roberts-Davis and Penrith halfback Nathan Cleary have been fined $4,000 each. All 4 players have also copped a suspended 1-match ban. And the Warriors boss, Cameron George, says they need more information before committing to the proposed resumption of the NRL competition. The Australian Rugby League Commission has confirmed it has an exemption from border authorities for the side to enter Australia on Sunday. But George says along with an exemption from the New South Wales government to train during their 2-week quarantine, they also need more details about players' families and payments and the competition structure. And that's the news.
There's no room for complacency as lockdown restrictions ease.
So no one here is sitting on their laurels. No one is saying job done. No one is saying final success.
So keep clean and keep vigilant.
If we head towards, say, level 2, that's when any remaining chains of transmission might suddenly appear.
But after a month at home, people are keen to get out.
A few people walking around with their first takeaway coffees in a while. And McDonald's drive-thru line was looking fairly busy.
Start your day with Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Mid-service short forecast now through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday for Northland, cloudy periods. For the rest of the North Island, it'll be fine apart from a few areas of fog tomorrow morning. For the South Island, except Fiordland, fine apart from a few areas of fog or frost in the morning. Fiordland, cloudy, patchy rain developing in the west. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers for the rest of today, cloudy periods tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Paul. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The National Party leader has dismissed any questions over his leadership, saying it's a distraction when the country should be focusing on how to rebuild the economy. Agitation over Simon Bridges' leadership was reignited last week, with many MPs unhappy about the tone of his response to the news the lockdown would be extended until today. MPs held a brief phone conference in lieu of the regular caucus meeting this morning. Mr Bridges says no one raised his leadership or any concerns about how he's been fronting National's response. Parliament resumed today in a limited fashion, with the plight of small businesses front and centre. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
When Simon Bridges posted his response on Facebook, saying the government had dropped the ball while the rest of New Zealand had done its job, there was a backlash online. The strength of the public reaction concerned some of his MPs, with some starting to question whether he was the right person to lead them into the election. But he regrets nothing.
I would say and do say the same things today, because I think it's really important, actually, that we get New Zealand back to work again.
MPs have also told RNZ they haven't seen any detailed internal polling for some time, which Mr Bridges refused to get into.
We talk about polling periodically, but I'm not going to discuss internal matters like that with the media.
Questions about the leak of a letter to him from senior MP Nick Smith, expressing disappointment about how the party will manage COVID-related policy, also dismissed.
That's the way it goes. We've been here before. But I think what it shows is National is working on our recovery plans for New Zealand.
Instead, Mr Bridges said the attention should be on the crushing impact of the extended lockdown on small business.
I'm focused on what matters, and I think right now that's a situation where lockdown and near lockdown is going too long. I appreciate some people won't agree with that, but I feel very strongly that we need to get New Zealand back to work again.
Meanwhile, at the Epidemic Response Committee today, Irish bar owner Reg Hennessy echoed the call for help from thousands of small businesses that can only operate in a limited way or not at all under level 3, saying commercial rents will be the end of them.
Unless the government steps in to help commercial tenants and landlords through this, we're heading for one huge shit fight. The only possible winners out of this will be the commercial lawyers.
The government has imposed a freeze on residential rents, but the Prime Minister says it's not so easy under the different law governing commercial rents. Jacinda Ardern urges commercial landlords to think about the potential consequences.
In the best interest of not just the New Zealand economy or indeed small business, but those commercial landlords in this particular environment, not coming to an arrangement that's workable for you and your tenant may end up, you may find yourself with a vacant property at a time that will be very very, very difficult to lease.
Question time was also back today with a roll call of relevant ministers. National's Paul Goldsmith asked Finance Minister Grant Robertson why small businesses have had no other help with cash flow further to the wage subsidy.
Does he think it's fair that under government policies that small business operators have been told by the government to close in the national interest, and yet they should be taking so much of the economic pain on behalf of the entire community?
It's been the recognition from the government from day one that we all needed to work together to be able to get through this. That's why we are very pleased by the fact that more than $10 billion has gone out the door to support businesses and workers.
Tomorrow, Parliament will sit again to pass under urgency the legislation needed to enact some aspects of the government's COVID response, including tax changes for business. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
A South Taranaki iwi says 70% of the people it stopped at a checkpoint near the small town of Pātea were flouting the rules under Alert Level 3. And that's why some communities need to take things into their own hands. A number of towns around the country have set up controversial checkpoints, screening people coming in and out in a bid, they say, to keep COVID-19 at bay. Debbie Ngarewa-Paka of Ngā Ruanui says of the 40 people who passed through today, just 12 had a valid reason.
There's no roadblocks. I sort of see that's been emphatic over social media. So what we have is part of our traffic management plan is we have people that are guiding the traffic. They come up to a group of us that are waiting, that are set up in a group of two. One holds the brochure which is about level 3 and where testing clinics are. And then the other is quickly saying, are you aware of level 3? Are you travelling within the requirements of level 3? Where have you come from and where you're going? And then for the locals, we've got a little I guess card that says I'm a local, so they don't have to be questioned numerous times. So and it probably takes about 5 seconds, unless we've had some that are very emotional. They've had to leave their bubble, they've had relationship issues and things going on. So we've been able to connect them with some social services and things that we sort of didn't really expect to be having today. But that's just sort of, I guess, what's come as a consequence of Connect.
Did you see today people who were fleeing bad relationships and bad situations during the lockdown?
We had one girl who probably stands out for me all day that had a dog. She had her car full of all her belongings and she'd travelled up from Wellington and had located a bubble that she could move to, and it was really obvious that she'd probably been crying the whole way. And as soon as we asked, how are you, it just all came out. And everyone's trying to practice social distancing. We sort of pulled her aside and took the car aside, and she was devastated. Beautiful young girl, and I just couldn't believe that she'd travelled that way. And she was in a bad space. And we had a son that had lost his dad. And, we're the first, people out, in a physical form that he'd spoken to. So it was pretty rough. Some people have had to endure some pretty tough situations. And, like I say, the slack is worth it. I'm glad we were able to be there to Manaaki and to give some kindness.
So I'm just trying to picture this in my head. Do you wave them down? Is there a sign that says, could you please, there's a stop coming up, or?
Yep. So these, our neighbouring iwi has put up the digital roadwork signs that sort of say community checkpoint coming up. And that's there's 3 of those between us and Wanganui. The last one being about 2 k's before they reach us. Then it comes into a 50 zone area, which has been taken down to 30. They come round and are guided in from the traffic management. And I guess that's anyone that's not a Fonterra truck and not all the heavy traffic that's typical of essential services isn't brought in. It's more those if you've got a boat, a caravan, if you're a juicy camper van, if you have a jet ski, if you have BMX bikes, which is really some of them that we've had today. So it's really about, wading through and not pulling everyone through the checkpoint lane. And it took us, it sort of worked quite seamless because I think you sort of can see, No, like I say, we've had a few camper vans this morning and international travellers that weren't aware of the full details of Level 3 and sort of thought they could go around on holiday again. So, yeah.
So the law is pretty clear on this. Only the police or emergency management agencies can set up a checkpoint. So why should people stop for this checkpoint?
It's really interesting that there's been a lot of outcry about it when we actually haven't had anyone say that they haven't appreciated the support to, I guess, make sure that our region's able to be safe and make sure that we're able to help those that haven't understood the Level 3 messaging. So I guess it all depends about the spirit and the intent of it. So the spirit and the intent of it is to work with everyone else. So we're lucky we've got the police here, and we're lucky that I guess it's not like Americana. So when you have Americana come through Taranaki, our roads are blocked for days. So it's a really gentle flow, and it is about being able to assure us as a region that we're safe, and most importantly help those who maybe have decided not to comply or not to understand Level 3. So yeah, it's we've seen lots of activities through Taranaki. Again, we can have Americana here stop our traffic for a week and there's not an outcry. But it just seems people are maybe not understanding the spirit of what the checkpoints are.
So what are you most worried about? Why do you feel that you have to do this yourselves?
I guess, I'm going to be really honest, Lisa. In the ideal world, we wouldn't have to be honest. We would have had other authorities, local government, whatever, step up. When we went to book traffic management crew, so we're not actually manning the traffic management per se. That's a crowd that are professionals that we've hired. We lost some of that because council's priorities were to put traffic management into managing, private businesses' queues, like in McDonald's and in KFC. So in the ideal world, we wouldn't have to fill these gaps. In the ideal world, there would be an approach that matches the intensifying of testing, and we would have local authorities taking more of, and with government, taking more of a considered effort to follow through what needs to happen from Level 4 to Level 3. And I guess that's the spirit of the checkpoint. It's not to be vigilante or to apply justice. No one here is doing that.
So what did you do with the people who were, as you say, breaking the rules at this level? What happened to them? The international travellers and the people who were travelling outside of their region?
They were referred to, what the law of the land says, and then our role is to purely educate and, I guess, effectively triage as a region, but they were referred to the police and taken to the side by the police, and what they do with them in their jurisdiction is their business.
And that's Debbie Ngarewa-Packer of Ngāti Ruanui, and she has been at a checkpoint near Pātea today where she says 70% of the people stopped at that checkpoint were flouting the Level 3 rules. The European Union fears the continent's tourism market could lose up to $720 billion because of the pandemic. Europe normally accounts for about half of all international tourists, but for the past few weeks, the streets of its biggest cities have remained silent. Deutsche Welle's Alex Forrest-Whiting filed this report.
From Paris to Brussels. European capitals that should be filled with people lie almost empty and silent. With borders closed and members of the public forced to stay home, Europe's tourism industry is in dire straits. The European market accounts for half of world tourism, according to the EU Commission. It fears the tourism economy within the 27-nation bloc could fall by up to 70%. That could result in the loss of up to €400 billion for the industry. Spain is the most popular tourist destination in the EU. It's also the world's second most visited nation. But there are no visitors these days. For bar owners like Pablo Gonzalo, it's a worrying time.
The year 2020 is practically blank. Many businesses will not reopen because they won't be able to continue. Right now, the only thing to do is to look month by month and not think about the distant horizon.
Across the border, the Portuguese government has said it will start reopening hotels in June for those that are still in business. Others are taking things into their own hands. In Berlin, hotel and restaurant owners have taken empty chairs to Brandenburg Gate to illustrate just how tough life has become for them.
Berlin
lives on tourism. If we don't support our hotels and restaurants with this action, who will?
Most European governments are already offering more financial support to tourism and travel sectors. But for some businesses, it may already be too late.
And that is Alex Forrest-Whiting reporting there. A few of you getting in touch about this interview on roadblocks. That was near Patea, where there is a roadblock set up there, and they were saying that 70% of the people they stopped today didn't have a valid reason for travelling under alert level 3. Des from Wanganui says it's illegal for any group of citizens to block roads. The folk at the checkpoints are acting against the treaty. Free travel, unless law is involved, it's simply illegal. And someone else says about the community roadblocks, wouldn't the police have shut it down if it wasn't a good thing for the community? Another, roadblocks are still illegal. Thanks for getting in touch. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101. Staff at McDonald's in New Plymouth were braced for a rush this morning as we adjusted to alert level 3, in which for many meant a return to work. And they weren't disappointed. Customers began queuing at the drive-thru at 3:30am. And by the time the fast food restaurant opened at 5 o'clock, about 40 vehicles were snaking through the car park. Our reporter, Robin Martin, has more.
Franchise owner Lauren McCausland says she was blown away by the response to the store reopening.
Oh, it was awesome. It's really heartwarming to see, I guess, the love for the brand coming out and that people are really excited to get back in and get their Maccas fixed. The menu choices were interesting. It wasn't breakfast. Everyone was craving their Big Mac and quarter pounder and fries.
Hemi Rangi was on his way to work when he called in at about 7 o'clock. He had a particular menu item in mind, a combo involving 4 burgers.
Well, I'm quite into these hunger buses, so that's usually my come to at the breakfast time.
What have you been doing for breakfast during the lockdown then?
I'm having to cook my own.
How's that been?
Hard. I'm not a good cook.
In Dunedin, scrap metal worker and truck driver Mike Bowles was also looking forward to getting back behind the wheel. But he also had meal breaks in mind, and in particular, how to manage them safely.
Just maintaining the 2 metre distancing, how we're going to, like lunch breaks, smoker breaks, getting to and from work, that type of thing.
Nelson Cottle, the owner of Auto Court, a Dunedin car sales business, had his own challenges. How to coordinate contactless test drives for buyers who'd expressed an interest in a vehicle online.
We then would drop the car to their house. When we drop the car off to their house or business, we have to sterilise the car. We then ring them up, say there's a car waiting for you outside your premises, and then they'll take it for a drive.
Mr. Cottle says he's expecting business to be tough as more people lose jobs. Meanwhile, this Wellington rail commuter, who preferred not to be named, had noticed an uptick in patronage as office workers returned to the capital.
Oh yeah, well, it's pretty different, everyone just tried to distance everyone. Not really busy, but few people more than I thought, because I thought it's going to be really few people, but 4 or 5 people more.
Christchurch barista Fumi Takai says his customers convinced him to reopen his Riverside Market business, Espresso Studio.
Actually, many customers asked me when we open, so we decided to open under level 3.
He isn't expecting a lot of sales, however.
I'm not sure because people still have to stay home, so I hope we sell a lot, but probably no.
Meanwhile, in Nelson, people were queuing up outside the organic shop, which this local thought was great.
I am so impressed with that because I would have thought it would have been McDonald's.
Cool, that's everything for today.
Yeah, that's it, thanks.
Cool, driving up.
Cheers.
New Zealand will be in alert level 3 until at least May the 11th, when the government is set to make an announcement about the move to alert level 2 and a life almost as we knew it before COVID-19. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin aho.
7 weeks after Italy announced a lockdown, the country is taking its biggest step yet in returning to normality. From next Monday, restrictions will begin to be lifted, including reopening parks and allowing manufacturing and construction. And like New Zealand, restaurants will be allowed to serve takeaways. Mark Lowen from the BBC filed this report.
For 30 years, they've been cooking up Italian classics in family-run Ripadodici. For 7 weeks, it's been delivery only. But from next Monday, they can offer takeaway too, as the world's first national lockdown of the pandemic starts to ease. There'll be strict rules on hygiene and numbers. But for the owner's daughter, it's welcome.
On one hand, it's a relief because we're overcoming the emergency stage of the outbreak and can see a glimmer of hope. But on the other, we're full of sorrow because it won't be a simple return to normality. The lockdown has had a catastrophic impact. It's been the sacrifice of a lifetime to build our restaurant. We can reopen, but many won't.
As Italy starts to unlock, parks too will open up and outdoor exercise will be allowed. A breath of fresh air for Veronica and her 4-year-old son, Tito. I'm happy I'll be able to play inside, he says, and I'm looking forward to feeding the ducks. Movement too will be eased. The police checks will remain, but people will be allowed to travel within their own region and to visit relatives with face masks. A taste of freedom for a nation that's endured such suffering.
This is a roadmap to reopening by a government keen to show Italians that their sacrifices are paying off. Italy's national lockdown came exactly 2 weeks before that of Britain. The authorities here feel that people now deserve to see a way out, so that patience doesn't fray.
But psychologists say it is already. Professor Giampaolo Nicolais talks to his students about the impact on families. With schools shut till September and children feeling their parents' stress and fear, he's seeing many new patients.
Are you worried that this could be something long-term?
I think so. These symptoms we know from experience that may happen and be manifest in the moment, but also may come out months later. We can have delayed reactions.
And while small funerals can resume, church services can't. The clergy says that goes against freedom of religion. The lockdown has been Italy's salvation. Lifting it is a risk, but also an attempt to show this country it will recover one day.
Mark Lowen reporting there. People in New South Wales will be allowed to visit some family and friends from Friday. The Australian state is relaxing its social restrictions, including letting people visit other homes for small gatherings. Bondi Beach also reopened today. Mental health is being cited as a significant reason for the relaxing of the rules. The ABC's Barbara Miller reports.
Tourists aren't yet welcome again on Bondi Beach. The partial reopening is being targeted at locals and only those ones prepared to head straight to the water for a swimmer surf. It's not Bondi as we know it, but many of those heading down this morning were just grateful to be back.
It was so good, it was so nice. The water's actually really warm at the moment, yeah. It's amazing that it's open again.
I can't believe there's no one on the beach and I still can't find my towel. Unbelievable, but it's good to be back.
After appearing unwilling to ease up on restrictions, the New South Wales Premier has announced a significant change to rules around visiting other households. Gladys Berejiklian acknowledged the strict measures in place currently were taking a toll on people's well-being.
From May the 1st on Friday, 2 adults will be able to go and visit anybody else in their home on the basis of care, on the basis of reducing socialisation and everybody's mental health.
The changes are being made possible because the number of new COVID-19 cases in the state continues to be low. Just 5 in the past 24 hours, with the total now just over 3,000. But the death toll has also crept up. Chief Medical Officer Kerry Chant.
There has been one new death related to the Newmarch house, an 89-year-old female resident of the Anglicare Newmarch house, and this brings the total number of deaths linked to this facility to 7. And there has also been one new case in a staff member at Newmarch house, which brings the total to 54 cases, including 20 staff and 34 residents.
The aged care sector is under continued pressure from the federal government to ease visiting restrictions at homes. The Minister for Aged Care, Richard Colbeck, spoke to RN Breakfast.
We're saying to the sector, it's not open slather, it's a short visit, a couple of people for a short period of time, and everybody who goes into a facility should be screened to mitigate for the risks. So it's not an open slather exercise, but we think that it's really important that people have access to their families and loved ones for their broader well-being, and it is just not sustainable if this goes on for 6 months, for example, that people won't have access to their families.
And that was Barbara Miller with that report. That's all we've got time for this evening. Don't forget, you can go and look back at all our stories online, particularly some of the video packages from today are worth a look. You won't believe the queues to get takeaways under level 3. Thanks for joining us. Morning Report will be back with you first thing this morning. Tomorrow morning, we'll catch you in the evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says the country will move quickly to level 2, only if everyone follows the rules for alert level 3. The police say they recorded almost 6,000 breaches of lockdown rules over the 33 days the country was at alert level 4. Only a fraction of the usual numbers of children are expected to turn up to early childhood centres and schools tomorrow. And the Union of Students Associations says it's unfair. Its members are having to pay thousands of dollars for accommodation they haven't been able to occupy during the lockdown. Those are the headlines. Our next news at 7.
Tonight on Nights, Brian Easton tries to make sense of the global economy in the wake of the COVID meltdown. Kiran Das engages in smart talk with the Omani author Joka Al-Hathi. If you think there's no live sport to watch, you obviously haven't heard of virtual supercars. There's some of the best races in the real world. Slug it out online.